Welcome to Private Club Radio, the industry's first and only program dedicated to education, news, events, trends and announcements. Broadcasting from Tampa, Florida, ladies and gentlemen, here is your host, Gabriel Aloisi.
Welcome to another education-packed show. Our guest today is Norm Spitzig, Principal and Senior Partner at Master Club Advisors. During the interview, we touch on the attributes that make a great private club GM and what makes for great board governance. We'll find out what boards really want from their general managers, and we asked Norm a question that came from one of our loyal listeners. What makes a candidate for general manager stand out to a board or a hiring professional? Since Norm is in the business of executive placement, I thought he'd be just the right gentleman to ask, and his answer did not disappoint. If you have questions you'd like answered on the show, send them my way. You can fill out the form at privateclubradio.com, and I'll have one of our experts answer it for you right on the show. I love that type of interaction, so don't be shy. And while you're at privateclubradio.com, remember you can subscribe on your favorite podcast app on your mobile phone. That way you can take the show with you on the road wherever you go. We even have some instructions on there. Just hit the subscribe today button on the top right of that webpage. We'll be back with Norm's interview after these messages.
Are you searching for members? Are you looking to drive revenue to every department of your club? With Course Driver, you can. Course Driver is a custom smartphone application designed specifically for your club. Visit CourseDriver.com to schedule your demo today.
This episode of Private Club Radio Show is brought to you by Wildstyle Media, an award-winning media firm and a leader in high-end audio and video production. Wildstyle Media offers full-service media production, post-production, and creative solutions for your company or brand. Contact us today at wildstylemedia.net or call 813-358-6588 today.
All right, let's bring on Norm. Norm Spitzig is an internationally recognized, eloquent, and visionary expert on private club operations and volunteer board governance. His groundbreaking book, Perspectives on Club Management, now over 30 years old, continues to inspire and challenge club directors, managers, and students around the world. Norm is also the author of 4 very funny and insightful books centered around the wonderful world of private clubs in America and around the world, Murder and Mayhem at Old Bunbury, How Now, Norm's Tao, and Soul on Nice. Norm's leadership and professional contributions to the private club industry have been varied and significant. He was elected a national director of CMAA in 1989. He served as national president in 95. The same year, he became one of the 6 original general managers to earn the prestigious Lifetime Master Club Manager designation. Norm currently serves as Principal and Senior Partner at Master Club Advisors, publisher of the premier newsletter for leaders in the worldwide private club industry, Club Management Perspectives, and now regarded by more and more leaders in the private club industry as a general manager executive search firm of choice. Norm's board of directors leadership orientations and strategic planning sessions have been very well received at national, regional, and local meetings of many professional associations, as well as great individual private clubs on 6 continents. He has the singular honor of having been twice named the club industry's Educator of the Year. Norm, welcome to Private Club Radio. So happy to have you.
Gabe, thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited about speaking with you.
Excellent. So the first thing I want to get into is you have some great ideas on what makes a good private club and what makes even a great private club. Can you tell listeners a little bit about your opinion on that?
That is a very complex and long topic. And I think what I'd rather do is hone in on a few of the components of what makes a great club. About 20 years ago, when I was the manager of Fort Wayne Country Club in Indiana, I'm a prolific writer as an aside and really like to enjoy writing things. I really tried to put on paper what I thought were the components of a great private club. And I wrote it. It was actually published in Club Management Magazine, and it's taken a life unto its own. I've actually found people who I was friends with in college who ended up being a president of a club and saw it and published it. It's been published. It's been translated in a bunch of different languages. So it's really, I think, caught on and resonated with a lot of people. In the article, I tried to identify a dozen components of what makes a truly great private club. And you could talk about many of them. I thought maybe if it was just to keep the conversation focused, I'd talk about two that really seem to resonate especially well today.
Okay, perfect.
And one of those is great clubs, I think, are clubs that have reasonable, understandable, and fairly enforced rules. Reasonable in the sense that we don't have a rule saying you will be shot on sight if you come to the club with your cell phone on. There are all clubs that still do that. Understandable, meaning that you don't have to read it 4 times. Like you can wear jeans in the club on a Tuesday after 5 p.m. in the summer when no other members are around. Well, who's going to go to a club like that?
Right.
And fairly enforced. I think a lot of general managers today are put in this bind by their boards, either knowingly or unknowingly, where they go out and say, look, John and Joe came into the club and you didn't have a jacket on Friday night, require jackets. Go out and enforce it. Club managers by their nature are people pleasers. And so when they go out and enforce the rule, yes, they can do it, but now you've got a member who is distraught, to say the least. And more often than not, sometimes when the manager or the staff enforce the rule, what you end up having is a board that will back down. So now the management looks ridiculous because they're trying to enforce a rule, whether it's important or not, and it may or may not even be important. I'm certainly not anti-rule. I tell you a little anecdote, which I find funny. I travel a lot, as you know, and go around the world and work with a lot of clubs in terms of GM search and board orientations. And I go to this one particular club that I won't mention their name because they'll recognize it. But it's a great club. I go every year and do a board orientation for them. Well, this particular year, I ended up staying at a bed and breakfast owned by one of the board members. It was a nice place. I'm an early bird. I come down in the morning at 6:45. I wanted a cup of coffee, and there was no one there except the desk. And I saw the guy the desk clerk was sipping his coffee and working. And I said, can I get a cup of coffee? And he said no. And I said, I beg your pardon. I said, well, I'll just go back in the kitchen and get it. You don't have to get up. He said, no, we serve breakfast at 7 a.m. And it was now 10 till 7. And I said, but do you have a cup of coffee? He said, I'm staff. You're a guest. No coffee for you.
Gosh.
And I tell you that because I don't think he was an evil guy. He just had a rule. Someone told him the rule was no coffee before 7. And he just enforced it. And I see that stuff all the time. People belong to clubs, I think, because they want to get away from the complex rules of our society. And so whatever you're going to do, take a hard look if you're managing a club or you're a governor of a club, look at your rules. I was in Stockholm maybe 3 years ago, and I met with the Stockholm Golf Club, and I love what they did. They went through their rules very, very carefully and eliminated all the rules that were either duplicates, outdated, or nonsensical. So the rule book was cut by 90%, to be honest. And then of the remaining rules, they rewrote them all and made them positive. No, you can't do this, you can't do that. Statements of positive about what our club culture is. And it was really refreshing to see. And I think the members there appreciate it. And I tell that story all the time. One other component that has really become important today of a great club is a club where members, their guests, their family can go and feel safe. All you need to do is look at Brussels earlier this week, and you can see that people feel threatened. And when you go to your club, you want it a place where you're reasonably confident that when you're there, you're going to be protected. You don't want to talk about armed guards, but we have security, and we have cameras, and we have those kinds of things that I know, and I can relax and be with my friends and not worry about the troubles of the world.
Right.
I'd be happy to have anybody who listens to the interview would like to hear the other 10 components. I'd be happy to talk about it. I've lectured about this all over the world, and it's up to be a passion of mine. But those two, I think, are really germane today.
Perfect. Well, those are two good ones to start with. So in your opinion, Norm, what are the characteristics of a great private club governance?
Well, again, I don't know if you've talked to Ray Cronin about his identifying club benchmarking. I don't know if you have or not. That Ray's a great good friend of mine, and he says, and I think he's right, that probably the biggest problem in today's world is poor governance. And again, I've worked with a lot of clubs. I worked for boards when I was a club manager, and worked with literally over 1,000 clubs in one capacity or another. And there's a lot of clubs where people just don't know what their job is. They just don't know. And I don't think they're evil. They don't know. As an example, I think if you're going to be a great governed club, you have to do your fiduciary responsibility. Everybody knows about that. Mm-hmm. But more importantly, you have to think strategically. So many boards get into the minutia of the day-to-day operations, either because they don't have a good general manager or they have a good one who's frustrated because he or she can't do the job. So it's obviously you've got to think from 30,000 feet. You've got to make sure that you do not focus on tactical discussions. If somebody had a bad tuna salad sandwich last night for dinner, that is not a topic for the board. Now, if you have bad food all the time, then you got a bad chef, a bad manager, or both.
Sure.
I get that, and you need to make a change. But boards don't talk about tactical things. You hire staff to do that. I think boards need to put aside, and I see it all the time, put aside their personal biases about what they think the club could be and act in a collegial manner. It's saying in the best interest of the club, we need to do the following things. Obviously, that's a key of strategic planning. We can talk about that. But I mentioned Ray Cronin before. Ray's really a big believer saying that we need to know the facts, not opinions. I've been in more board meetings where either as a manager or, assisting clubs in the strategic planning, well, someone will raise their hand and say, I just know our food cost is too high. And you just shudder because how do you know compared to what?
Right.
There are clubs that have 80%. My buddy, Jay down at Boca West, I don't know if you know Jay DePietro. He's a great guy and he's been there for a long time. I bet his food cost is well over 100%. Don't know for sure. It's high, but that's the culture of that club. They have a very high food cost and members get high-end, nonstop, reams of great food. There are other clubs where the food cost is very low. What's right for your culture? What's right for your club? So you need to understand the facts. And again, so many board members don't. I think you got to remember when you're a board member that this is the private club industry, and you got to remember what makes us unique. Clubs ultimately are in the people service business. They are not in the for-profit business, generally speaking. A profit's great. I'm not anti-profit. When I ran Battle Isles, we made a good profit, and nothing wrong with that. But you need to understand what makes the club industry unique. Generally speaking, most clubs exist for one reason only, to make the members happy in a manner consistent with their culture and their available finances. I think a lot of clubs forget to evaluate their manager. They just forget. Mm-hmm. And I think you need to do that on a regular basis so you and your manager are on the same page. Those are sort of the core characteristics. There are other ones, obviously, and that's pretty important.
So how do you change that culture from getting away from the nitpicking little details to thinking big picture and that sort of thing?
It's a great question. I think it is an ongoing process. When I was a young manager in my first job at Sanibel Country Club in Cincinnati, I was 26 years old. I thought I could fix it in 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 years, and here I am 40 years later, and you're still trying to fix it. I think it's a matter of ongoing education. I think you need a board orientation, either done internally or bringing in someone like me or somebody else who knows, at least makes you think. It's not that I have all the answers, but I think I can make you think about what great governance is. And maybe an example is the Carolina Golf Club. It's in Charlotte. When I first started going there 8 years ago, they did not have a full membership. The clubhouse was in trouble. They hadn't figured out really who they were. And not because I was there, because they did it all. But I go every year, and now 8 years later, they've got a wait list. They focused on who they were. They are a golf club primarily. That has a great Donald Ross golf course, so they put their resources into it. They have good food, but I think food is secondary to them. They are an enviable market in terms of being able to draw golfers from other clubs, but they know who they are, and I think you constantly reinforce that this is our job. It's ongoing. It's ongoing, and I think over time you can develop a culture of good governance so that when the people get on, they're good governors. Bobby Kerfossi, who runs New Orleans Country Club, you also do it by changing perhaps the structure. At Bobby's club, and I'll get this wrong, but I'm close. If he has 9 governors, a person serves for 9 years, and they bring one new governor on every year, or something to that effect. Some clubs, I've worked with a club in South Florida, where they had 12 governors, and they changed 6 every year. But, what kind of continuity are you going to get there?
Right.
You're going to zigzag forever. So some of it's just in the structure of your board. Some of it's in ongoing training. Some of it's in the culture that you build up over time about understanding who you are. Really important.
So let's talk about serving the membership. What do boards and members really want from their general managers?
The $64,000 question. It really is. There's some things, though, that I think are given. I think they want core characteristics in their manager, and that means integrity. That's a given, obviously. But if you don't have integrity, you're not going to be there. It doesn't mean you know all the answers and you do everything right. It does mean, though, that if you make a mistake, you make a mistake.
Right.
I think clubs want a person with a core characteristic of being a people-pleasing person. If you're a misogynist or you really don't like people, you're probably not going to be a good club manager. You like somebody who really gets a kick, kind of like the Greg Patterson of the world, who gets a really kick when something goes right at this club. I did a search for a club in Florida one time, 7, 8 years ago, and one of the candidates was really qualified on paper. I had known him a little bit, and he gave great answers, but they were short and terse. And finally, I could still see the president saying, your answers were good and we like you, but being a club manager is about being friendly. It's about being outgoing. It's about making people happy. Can you make people happy? And he said, yes. One word answer.
There you go.
He didn't get the job because he didn't have the personality.
Sure.
I think the third thing they want, that's sort of a core thing, is they want somebody who's a true leader. 20 years ago, early in my time as a club manager, a lot of general managers were not equal participants with the board in terms of the major decision making. The board obviously makes the big decisions in terms of governance and or strategic planning, but they want a general manager who will bring facts to the table today, not just a yes man who will, respond and do something that really doesn't make sense. So those are sort of the core things. Obviously, they want a manager who has sufficient expertise in running the club. It doesn't mean you know everything, but that means somebody who has the competencies to succeed, manage the people, manage the asset. Maybe the most important thing today for the right manager for the right club is having someone who is culturally compatible with the club. Greg and I talk about this a lot. Greg's big on defining what a club culture is. And if you know anything about the Beach Club, the Beach Club is a happy, fun place. I am sure everybody who belongs there is not Pollyanna, and I'm sure they have their challenges like every club. But when you go there, it's a respite away from home. I did the search for Greg's replacement, which was really very interesting. It was a year-long project to find the right person. Finding somebody who follows in Greg's footsteps is not easy. But we found a good guy. You're not going to find another Greg. We understood that. But the important part was understanding that this is a culture of happiness. The people belong to the Beach Club. Many of them belong to Los Angeles Country Club and the Vintage Club and all these really, quote, higher-end clubs. But maybe they're not as much fun as the Beach Club. So they want somebody who understands and is a good fit for that culture. I look back at myself, and for a dozen years, I ran Fort Wayne Country Club in Fort Wayne, Indiana. While I was there, we had a wait list. We had plenty of money in the bank. We had a full complement of members. That was the time. But more importantly, I'm a Midwest nice guy, I think. I'm all Midwest anyway, and my wife is Midwest, and they're Midwest, and we sort of had the same sort of values about life. And if you could work at a club where there's that cultural compatibility, I think it allows the manager to be successful more often, more likely. I think it allows the board to better understand their manager. So those are certainly some of the characteristics. I'll just add one thing that I think you'll find interesting. There were 3 independent studies by different people in different decades trying to ascertain what the real characteristics of successful long-term general managers were. One of them was Michael Leemays, who's now the president, general manager, if you will, of the Ocean Reef Club in South Florida. And Michael is obsessed with leadership, to be honest. He and I have spoken together around the world on numerous occasions. And when he did his survey results at all the times he spoke, one behavior emerged as common, identified as the most important by every single group. It was amazing. And that's someone who is a good listener or a good communicator. It's real important, I think, for successful general managers to have the skill to really hear what the members say, what they want, and act accordingly. The other two surveys were one by Cornell University, where they did surveys in 1977, I think, and again in 1999 of people who were successful general managers. And the third I mentioned was Mitchell Platt, who got his Master Club Manager monograph. And all three of them came up with the traits that I mentioned. It was pretty amazing, really, how it overlaps in different times and different decades. So I find there a lot of validity in the fact that, all these different independent studies showed that someone who has these skills is important.
Absolutely. We were given 2 ears and one mouth for a reason, right?
As they say, that's true.
All right, Norm, you're an accomplished author in the private club industry. You've written some nonfiction and some fiction. Tell us a little bit about those books.
Perspectives on Club Management is a compilation of articles that I wrote about 25 years ago and published it. It is a non-satirical, straightforward attempt to capture in about 13 articles what makes a good club a great club. And that's been around for a long time. A lot of people have used that. It's still actually being used by some universities. About 7 years ago, the literary itch came upon me, and I decided to see if I could communicate the same information in a humorous, somewhat sarcastic, I hate to say it, Norm Spitzig off the wall way. And that is a book called Private Clubs in America and Around the World. The two characters in there are Clive Ogive, who is a snooty, know-it-all, condescending, don't mess with me, autocratic club president who basically gets everything wrong. And I've had club presidents, I guess the best way to describe this particular book is Private Clubs in America's sells pretty regularly still. I had one president of a club in Chicago who bought it, found it. This is about 6 years ago. Liked it so much, he bought one for everybody on his board. They liked it so much, they bought, again, everyone for everybody who belonged on club committees. They liked it so much, they bought one for everybody who joins the club, and they still buy one today. So I don't know what that says. Esther is a particular waitress who permeates all four of my recent books. She is a know-it-all, snooty, long-tenured waitress who really has a heart of gold deep down. She's never going to get fired, and she understands in her own kind of off-the-wall way that if you take care of the members and you take care of service, that's paramount, and whether she serves from the left or the right is irrelevant. I'm not dismissing improper service. I'm just telling you that when you go out, someone who recognizes your name, knows that what you like to drink and what you like to eat is far more important than sort of the niceties of formal service. I tell a story about my wife and I. My wife and I have been married for 35 years. When we go out for dinner, we order a beer and a glass of Chardonnay. If it's the first time, invariably the waitress will put the beer in front of me and the glass of Chardonnay in front of her. We all have stereotypes. Well, I'm the Chardonnay drinker and she's the beer drinker. That's okay. That's a small thing if we're new. But if we come back to the restaurant the third or fourth time and you're still doing that, you're not like Esther. You're not picking up on who we are and what we like. And that's one little service tidbit that I think people need to do. That's why you belong to a club, after all. They know your name. They know what you like. They make you feel good. And they know that what you like to do. Anyway, all four of these characters have survived. Clive and Esther have survived my last four books. They've all done pretty well, and it's just a great way for me to keep engaged in the club industry. I just love writing.
Excellent. So where can folks pick up copies of these books?
You can go to, you can get them on Amazon, obviously, or you can go to the website. One is the last two are written under my name. You can go to www.normspitzig.com. That's for the last two. That's for How Now, Norm's Pal, and for Soul on Nice, which is a follow-up to Private Clubs in America. The first two, you can go to www.clive, which stands for the fourth.com, and that's for Private Clubs in America and Around the World, and its follow-up, Murder and Mayhem at Old Bunbury, where somebody is actually murdered at Old Bunbury, and Clive and Esther team up to solve the murder.
Oh, that sounds great.
They've all done pretty well.
We'll put the links on our show page for you as well. That way folks can easily get to them.
Oh, thanks very much. That's good. People really enjoy them, and like I said, it's more a labor of love for me to write them. They've been good.
Excellent. So, Norm, you're, of course, the principal and senior partner at Master Club Advisors. Can you tell us about the company and why you started it?
Great. I sure can. In 1999, Bill Schultz, who just retired from Houston Country Club and is really one of the during his day, one of the best managers in the United States, and not around the world, a real food expert in particular. A gentleman named Ed Henderson, who we both had known for a long time and served on the CMA board together, and myself said, look, there's really nobody in the club industry other at that time, John Sibald, who was doing searches. And with all due respect to John, who was a good friend, and I've sort of lost touch with him, we thought we could do it better because we knew the club business. So with humble beginnings, we founded the company. And over the course of the last 16 years, we've expanded. We've done about 400 GM searches. We do lots of board orientations and strategic planning facilitations, which I've talked about. They're really fun. I just came back from one in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I think the club really is refocused and re-energized to take it to a new level of greatness. We do seminars in the fall where we call them symposiums, where like managers from like clubs gather typically for a day or two and share experiences, and they've been around for a long time. So it's all a labor of love. And of course, I mentioned the speaking. I enjoy traveling with Greg. I do some things on my own, but I really at this point like the idea of giving back to the club industry. All three of my kids worked in the industry when they were young. They either were smart enough or not so smart, whatever they all left the club industry and all have lives of their own. And then I'm living in the basement, so I must have done something well. but they're all out. We just love, the industry's been good, and this is my time to give back as best I can. And that's what I like to do.
And you mentioned Greg. That is, of course, Greg Patterson, who is your speaking partner as you do some traveling together. Excellent. Yeah. Excellent. All right. So we have a lot of job seekers listening to this show, people that want to become a GM at a club, somebody that you'd be looking for. I'd love for you to sort of tap your wisdom here and give us what you think you'd like to see in terms of a skill set or a background that clubs are looking for these days. Can you help give our job seekers some advice?
I'll try. I think I see a fair number of people, although it's declining, I hope, and maybe I'm just more optimistic. I see people apply for a lot of jobs, and I think really what you need to do is find a job where you are culturally compatible with that club. Yes, you have to have the skills. Yes, you have to have the personality to succeed there. Yes, you have to have all the work ethic and the training. That's all important. But if you're not a good fit with what the values are of that club and what your own personal values are, you're not going to last that long. I mentioned, several people that if I post a job, the same people apply all the time. And, it's just not really what it's about. Actually, I like to discourage people. If you're happy where you are, stay where you are, flourish. Greg tells the story. He was at the Beast Club 33 years. When he went there 34 years ago, he obviously didn't say, I'm going to stay here for the rest of my life. But unbeknownst to him and the board at the time, he found something that was so important to him, a good fit where he could be Greg Patterson, that there was no reason to change. So I certainly would do that. I will tell you also, the people are listening, that what really engages boards when they're interviewing a general manager is someone who is enthusiastic. I will tell you that enthusiasm wins over competence all the time. Now, I'm not dismissing competence. You got to have competence too. But someone who's competent and dry has got a less chance than someone who's just wildly enthusiastic. A third thing, which I've noticed, this is almost anecdotal, is that, yes, boards understand what a CCM is, a certified club manager, and they get it, maybe not viscerally, and it's important. And as a past president of CMA, I endorse it constantly. It's really important. But somebody who has an MBA, I don't think I've ever had an MBA candidate not at least get to the interview table. Clubs are businesses today. They want someone who can do all the things about making people happy, but they also want someone who can manage the affairs of the club from a financial perspective. There are very few clubs that are so wealthy that they don't give a hoot what it costs. There are a few, but even those clubs, no matter how much they pontificate, they really want their club managed prudently from a financial perspective. That doesn't mean cheaply or cutting out service or doing things in a half-ass manner. It does mean, though, that if I can do the job for, I'm just making this up, particular task for $10,000, let's not spend 20. Let's be wise and spend 10. So if you've got all those things, you will get to the table, be enthusiastic, know your stuff, do your research in advance about the club, understand the club financials, ask questions, not just respond to answers. That'll increase your chances of seeing if it's a good long-term fit for you.
Perfect. All right, so we've come to the last question of the day, and that is, Norm, you've been to clubs all around the country, of course, all around the world, and our listeners always want to hear what's one club that they need to see before they die.
Well, I have one that I want to see. I've been to Augusta. I've had the good fortune of actually playing there one time. So I've been to a lot of great places. I'm a 20 handicap going up, so I'm certainly not that good. But as I mentioned earlier, my wife and I really love New Zealand. And when Greg and I are going there, I won't be able to go this time. But there's a club called Cape Kidnappers in New Zealand, a place called Hawke's Bay. It's an old it's a 15-year-old Tom Doak design. Maybe it's a little older than that. I've seen so many pictures of it. It looks unbelievably spectacular. And there's lots of spectacular clubs, but when you combine the fact that it's in New Zealand, one of my wife's and my favorite places to visit, it's going to be on my bucket list to do. I've played at some pretty interesting places and visited some interesting clubs, but that's one that I haven't seen. I would say I'm just thinking about, this made me think when I was in Bogota 7-8 years ago. I actually played golf at the Country Club of Bogota. That was a time where being American there maybe wasn't the wisest. It's the only time I ever played golf where I had a caddy on one side of me and a guy with a machine gun on the other side who was protecting me. So It was a little unnerving after a while, but that was the culture of that beautiful country at that time. The Americans were, perhaps not the safest place for Americans, but that's since changed. It really has. So I've been a lot of nice places. I'm going to try to make it to Cape Kidnappers before I go to the Great Club in the Sky.
All right, that sounds great. I want to check that out. I haven't seen that club, but I'm going to check it out on the web and see what it's all about. I really, really appreciate it, Norm. How do folks find out more about you?
Oh, you can go to masterclubadvisors.com, just like it sounds, and you can find out a listing of our services, what we do, who we are, what we're about. And, again, for me, it's really, I'm at the stage in my life where just giving back and helping clubs get better from an operations point of view, from a governance point of view, from a strategic planning point of view. That really lights my fire, if you will, but as a kid, something from the 60s. But that really does make me feel happy, and I like doing that. And we mentioned the websites for my books. They're another way for me to give back, and I certainly enjoy that. So you can find out about me. I'm also on, I think I have 5,000 connections on LinkedIn, and if you're really crazy, you can follow me on Twitter at Clive the Club Guy. Clive the Club Guy has over 100,000 Twitter followers, and I will tweet about anything from clubs to politics to something sarcastic to the best pun that I heard in the last week. So if you like any or all of those things, you can follow Clive the Club Guy.
All right. I'm going to do it. That's for sure. Thank you so much, Norm. You have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Gabe. Appreciate it.
I love the guests we get on this show. I bet you do too. So join us next week, April 25th, when we speak with Mr. Peter Nanula, chairman of Concert Golf Partners. We'll be talking all things capital on that show. And May is going to be a very exciting month here. Check our schedule at privateclubradio.com to see the great guests we have lined up for you. Until next week, here's to your membership success.
Private Club Radio is brought to you by Shake Creative, the premier marketing and design firm, helping prestigious clubs increase and retain their membership. Visit shaketampa.com to learn more.